Welcome to yet another Smart KV Musings, which is a gentle flurry of interesting thoughts. And today, the musing is all about how can I unleash the smart tester, so to speak, in each one of us. So it's kind of looking at what it takes to constitute what is smart QA, what is smart tester, what does it take, some interesting ideas, concluding with the notion of what does it take to discover smart QA. That's how it is structured. So unleash the smart tester in you. What does it take is the objective. And so let's start with a simple statement. I guess testing by definition is always human. We seem to understand that. Focus certainly shifted on to automation, exploiting machines, more often from the perspective of efficiency. But now AI seems to be everywhere. And in the early stages of AI in the last few years, I guess the promises are always very interesting. Right? So what are we connecting here? It's time to be an intelligent tester again. So why am I making the statement? Is it time to be intelligent tester? Where do we not? We were. We are. We probably gave a little too much from the perspective of automation. Systems are more interesting now and more intelligent. So I'm kind of revisiting the idea and saying, hey, it's time to be intelligent testers so that we can exploit the power of intelligent machines today. And therefore, if you look at some of the interesting statement, which I think was an article in ET, the article the summarization of the article, which I took the liberty of simplifying it, is as AI makes answers abundant, because we are able to get a lot of answers by just asking simple questions, the value shifts to the craft of asking. And therefore, probing, which is the word that I like to use in the context of smart testing, or if you want to think about it slightly differently, which is really prompt engineering, is all about framing objectives and constraints with curiosity, critical thinking, and domain expertise. And this is what draws out some of the best solutions from the AI partners. When I say partners, the various systems, platforms, tools that we use. So today we are able to exploit in some sense the Gen AI piece via the notion of prompt engineering. What that would simply mean is that if we learn to start probing, I guess we exploit better. So OpenAI Sam Altman's put it, posing the right questions will soon matter more than simply finding answers. Something that I've always believed and always talked about for many, many years from the context of hypothesis-based immersive session testing, many, many years. To me, it was always about testing, was always about a sense of questioning. And people have always asked me, hey, I can ask questions, but I don't get the answer. So why ask questions? And my repartee for that most of the time has been, it's important to know what you don't know. It is nice if you can get the answers too. So I've always very strongly believed in the statement that Sam Altman put in now in this context, the article, where it's probably more important today and matters more important, especially now, to ask. And that's what we're trying to do with Gen AI systems. Well, the good part is some of the systems give us answers. Some of them are probably correct. Some of them are probably incorrect. Some of them are hallucinations. We all know that stuff. But the bottom line is today machines have traversed to a point where it can give you some fantastic stuff. It draws out the best solutions that you can see. And therefore, for me to exploit something fundamentally much more intelligent, I have to elevate, in some sense, my intelligence or be sure that I'm there. And therefore, it's necessary and imperative that the individual intelligence which I possess, which means that's the idea of smart testers, so to speak, coupled with the intelligence that's available from machines today, together, they ultimately form the ability for us to probably test much more smartly than what we do. I'm sure all of us are experiencing that in different ways. I just wanted to reiterate that piece, that it is not just me, it is not just the machine, it is that brilliant combination of both that makes it possible. And we probably therefore live in a very interesting time, in the early stage of time where we are seeing the massive influx of intelligence of a machine coming into what we do. So having set this bit of a context of saying that, hey, it is simply necessary for a tester to be far more intelligent in terms of not just doing things, but kind of adopt an idea of probing, focus on the act of asking questions, which can be aided with prompting, so to speak, wherever appropriate. And therefore, the way we do things dramatically shifts. Now, why do we want? Because I guess there are two important reasons. First, what do businesses expect out of assurance? More importantly, smart assurance. Well, I guess business is always looking at a few things. One, it says, look, can I do very well? Can you reduce the rework? Can you increase the capacity to do more with the same capacity? So if I've got X number of people in my team, I'm able to do a certain quantum of work. I would love to know, can you handle more work without adding more people, for example, right? The second is, can you cut down the amount of rework so that you can do more productive, forward-looking work, which actually yields revenue? So what is rework? If I find an issue, it's a rework. And if I find an issue, I have to fix it, which means it's a bit of a loss of money to do any more productive work for newer features. So the idea here is, first, businesses expect as a first step, what you're doing, can you do well? Can you do better than what you do today? Second, quite obviously, I think we understand this. Given that it's all about speed, they're simply asking, can you do faster? Can you do quickly? And therefore, we're talking about increase in the way we do things, the speed. The third expectation businesses have is, can you do it as early as you can? That is, can you preempt? Can you preempt? Can you prevent? It's what we currently call as the idea of shift left. And lastly, can you lessen the amount of work you do? Can you reduce the effort? Can you reduce the cost? Can you do as least as possible? So I guess when we talk about smart assurance and we ask, why should we do, what is expectation from a business, this is what probably comes to my mind. Doing well, doing quickly, doing early, and doing less. Now, if we take it to a personal context and then say, what do managers expect? So if you're a manager, what do you expect of the guy working in your project? And if he or she says is a smart tester, I guess there could be many things. I've just summarized it into three parts as far as what I can think of, which I thought was fairly important. One, the ability to be curious, which relates to the notion of questioning, figuring out a few things and so on. So I'm saying, look, maybe I expect you to be fundamentally very curious. Second, I fundamentally expect you to be very confident. That means whatever you do, you're able to justify. Whatever that you do, you're confident as to why you're doing it. You know why it is important to do, and therefore you know what to discard. So you're fundamentally confident in the way you do things. And thirdly, it's not just about confidently doing things. You are very seriously connected to the value of outcomes. And therefore, that's really the context as to what probably managers expect out of a smart tester, right? So given this bit of a background, I'm saying, hey, here is a world that is shifting into intelligent machines, a world where businesses and managers expect interesting things, and it only gets more and more with time. It is only necessary for us to rapidly embrace, if you will, or do it. And therefore, the question that I ask is, what does it take to unleash? What does it take to be a smart tester? That which is the crux of this entire music, so to speak. Now let's kind of decompose it a little bit and then see when I thought about this, and when we were thinking about it, inside, and we thought that maybe some of these are the elements of smartness. And we've tried to put it with the way what is, for example, the element of clarity. Ultimately, testing is seeking clarity. It is not the act of validation. Yeah, act of validation happens. The act of doing happens. But truly speaking, it is about constantly seeking clarity. Clarity in terms of what is supposed to be done, what if this happens, and therefore in the entire process, judge, suggest, improve. And therefore, testing in that sense is about seeking clarity. And seeking clarity demands one to probe. So we're constantly trying to figure out the what, the why, and the how. That's the key element, one of the key elements. I'm not saying this in a particular order, I'm just calling it one for a moment. Second, the ability to be logical. The notion of structured thinking, sound reasoning, so that it's not based on, trust me, my experience says, this is what I have done. Those are nice, I'm not discarding them, but there has to be fairly well grounded on the notion of logic. So when you say, here is my approach, here is my test case, here is how I do it, this is what I analyze, the intent is to say, look, here is the reasoning behind it. And therefore, there is a notion of strong logic. Third, purpose. We are doing a lot of work. We are questioning. We are using some logic to figure out a few things. But one of the key things that we always ask is, so why are we doing it? Is there a clear intent? Is there a focus? Now, one can argue that intention and focus is narrow. Possibly true. But then without an intent and a focus, he doesn't start a decent journey. So the idea here is keep, in some sense, the idea of goal, focus in mind, and therefore, so which means every activity that we do as a smart tester, is there a well-formed purpose that I can think? Is there a clear intent? And therefore, the activities get better driven. Number 4, the notion of value, which I think we talked about. We're not just doing activities because it's good. We're not doing activities because it's nice to do. It is simply because there are some meaningful outcomes. How does it help the product, the company, the community, and so on? So how do you connect the notion of work to real outcomes? So that's expected of possibly the element of smartness. The alignment. We do end up doing work. We have a goal to accomplish. We have put out a plan. We have certain effort that we have. We have certain money that we have. We have certain time that we have. The question is, they always go to balance. So the constant continuous alignment to the goal with the plan, with the effort, is a fundamental element probably of the notion of smartness. Yeah, you are clear, you're probably logical, you're very purposeful, you're aligned in terms of value, but are you confident? Can you guarantee? Can you kind of guarantee that what I'm doing is good enough? So how do I ultimately build confidence? Because at the end of the day, business and people and supervisors or fellow people expect confidence from us in terms of actions that we do and the results that we get. I think it's self-explanatory. How minimal can you do? How optimal can you be? So can you just do enough and still deliver the highest amount of impact? So how are we this is fundamentally an engineering trait of being constantly optimizing, which is, I guess, a standard element of smartness, engineering smartness. Depth. Yes, we do things. The question is how much of depth and how much of breadth. And that's where the notion of critical thinking comes into picture, going beyond the surface. And not all the questions, as we talked about earlier, have the answers. But then the critical thinking demands the idea of asking questions, going beyond the supreme. Why are we doing this? How would they use it? What could possibly go wrong? What if situations? And so on. So there's a fundamental notion of depth in the way we think. And finally, the reality check of constant and continuous evolution with the context that we are faced. The notion of adaptability. We may have less time. We may have some new things to be added. Variety of things that we do, which I think all of us see every day. The idea is adaptability. So I've tried to kind of set the context in terms of saying maybe these are some of the key elements of smarts or smartness, if you will. And some of these change the way I think or shape the way I think. And some of them have also a salutary aspect on the way we do. So the act of smartness doesn't just come from the act of doing. It obviously comes from the mental mindset that I possess, the way I'm structured to it, the philosophy that I embody at the end of the day, and so on and so forth. So if this was a bit of an abstract, can we give it a bit of a reality check? Can we connect it, if you will, to some of the test life cycle activities, to some of these key elements, and just see, if you will, some less abstraction, some bit of reality check. So what does this mean? So if I put on the left side the various elements, and on the x-axis, if you will, consider the various life cycle activities that we end up doing as a test person, a QA person, the idea of understanding, planning, designing, automating, validating, very simple test life cycle. I'm just trying to look at it and saying, what do some of these result in? So it's like saying, okay, the various elements are aligned. So understand what? Understand who, for who, what are we testing, for what are we evaluating, where is it being done? Things like those, which are very fundamental to get a more bigger picture. And so what happens in the context of understanding? To be able to understand the bigger picture, put in the various connections, get a good landscape of it, come up with an initial map so that I can start planning, it requires us to do one question. So the idea of questioning as an activity which is hopefully connected to helping you build clarity, asking questions which are hopefully purposeful, which have some value at the end of the day, I'm sure you can connect. The idea of testability, that, in the understanding phase, you want specs to be given or information to be given that can be validated. It is not very useful if something is vague. You want it to be clear. So you're looking at testability and testableness, so to speak, as a set of activities that we do, maybe while we are reviewing, while we are exploring, and so on and so, while we are discussing. And last but not the least, it's not necessarily that's the only three things, but I'm trying to get the idea that maybe in the context to understand the notion of precision. That means certainly focused on the idea of clarity, for sure, more appropriately. So you can look at it as, here are some of the activities that are like questioning, ascertaining testability and improving it, clarifying and being as precise as we can so that I have a better sense of understanding. Does it mean I will completely understand correctly? Will everything be precise? No. That's why I think the idea was questioning is more important than the answers. So like that, I'm trying to kind of look at it from each of these phases going forward into plan, as to the idea of scoping. How do I scope well? The activities related to some notions of prioritization, ensuring that the plan is workable and has least amount of variance. All these various activities that are listed in bold at the bottom and the one on the top, just kind of giving you an idea of plan, how much, what, when, are all in some sense, I'm sure, you can relate to the key elements that we kind of briefly alluded to, which is available on the left side. When it comes to design, I think the notion of confidence. How do I know it is covered well? How do I know that it is enough? How can I justify that I'm doing well enough? How do I know that I've looked at it from various different points of view of users, environments, issues, types of tests, new ones, regression ones, etc. So many point of views that we use to probably come up with test cases, scenarios, or put more appropriately the idea of probes, right? And they also, if you can see, I'm sure you can connect some of these to probably some or one or many of the current elements that you see on the right side. So when we say design, we are designing with what? With what probes are we trying to evaluate a system? When it comes to probably activities of automation, I think we're really looking at it as, how can I keep as painless as possible, keeping that script in sync with what I do? So is it modifiable? Can I run it for a long time without unattending piece? Can it be as independent as it can? So some of these activities that I'm focused on when I write my scripts. So automating what and automating which. So when it comes to the active validation, some of the key activities is key things that you're expecting, as probably some of them are mindsets explicitly, the ability to observe, being observant, the ability to constantly steer and adjust and improvise, what we might say context. The idea to constantly come up with newer ideas, you might call it creativity. The last one, but not the least, again, could be the idea of learning, because you will discover something, you will learn something, adjust and revise and continue on. And therefore, these obviously are some of those things that fundamentally we do during the act of validation or execution of whatever that we do in a human fashion. And finally, when we look at it from analytics, analyzing activities, analyzing outcomes, what I think we are interested from an idea of smartness with respect to the activity aligned with the elements is it actionable? Or is it just a vague, generic kind of an activity? Let's improve the process, let's automate. Or is it much more specific, and can you see some results in the immediate near term? And if I'm not able to see any kind of result in a near term, it's quite possible that I might be disillusioned. So nonetheless, you want to see a constant continuous improvement that happens as quickly as possible and rolls over and becomes bigger, and therefore improve at a larger picture. So given the fact that when we say smartness, there might be certain elements that are fundamentally important and how it relates to some of the key activities that we do in the context of life cycle. So the idea here being that, okay, having established that these might be some elements, these are some of the activities and how they relate, then it might only be necessary for us to kind of look at, I hope you see the connection with the outcomes that we talked about and the elements. So at the end of the day, we can do all these activities aligned along those elements, but it's important that we keep cognizance of the fact that we see the connection of these elements to the outcomes. Though if I am clear and if I am logical, if I am purposeful, if I am focused on value, well, I hope to God you can do, it can accomplish the act of, yes, outcomes are much better and doing well, which means reducing rework, increasing capacity, doing quickly. It's about saying, hey, I can do it speedily, doing early, which we talked about as shift left, and doing less is about reducing cost, reducing effort. So on one side, in the previous one, we talked about the activities and the connections to the elements, and here we are talking about the outcomes and their connections to the key elements, so to speak. Having established that maybe these key elements are the ingredients to smart tester, which is probably in some sense imperative in the current world where the machines are indeed intelligent. And that's the kind of stage that I'm trying to set up in this music for you. And then the final question that comes up, which is in tune with the topic name, is, okay, if that is what is smart, and that is what makes me a smart tester, how do I unleash it? It is not that this is some external stuff. All of us have it. All of us do it. Sometimes we may not have discovered some of those. Some of this we are very evident. We have already done that. And here we're really asking, how do I unleash the smarts in me? Is it listening to somebody? Probably not. Is it reading something? Probably not. I think it's much more strongly based on the idea of reflection. It is strongly based on the idea of analysis, which is indeed personal. So we're really saying that if I want to unleash the smarts in me, it is imperative that I reflect on the activities that I do in the various stages of the life cycle. Maybe keeping in mind that here are certain elements that are probably necessary, and therefore analyze my activities that I do in terms of reflection and the outputs in terms of the expectations, and ask, where am I? Could I do anything better? Could I be smarter in certain things? That is one part. Is it all? No. It is about reflecting and analyzing to realize what are the key elements, which is what we briefly talked about earlier. That we realize that in the connection of key elements, these are some things that I probably need to work on, and therefore I have. Now, is it just a matter of just finding out a gap and doing it? No. I guess at the end of the day, the notion of intelligence is far more deeper. It has to somehow connect to a deeper philosophy, if you will, of the notion of assurance, because we are focusing from an assurance, right? So there must be something more deeper in terms of what we need to connect to, which ultimately unleashes, if you will, the notion of smartness. And the philosophy may be maybe explicitly stated or maybe available as a method or a methodology or something. It's not just a superficial set of gaps and filling those gaps with a certain knowledge and activity. I think it has to be a little more deeper. And if that realization ultimately results in a connection, then quite obviously we become hopefully more smarter in the way we do, resulting in the shift in the way we think, the mindset, shift in the way we do the actions. And therefore, the idea of unleashing or figuring out what I have and then surfacing it out, to me, it is kind of these four things on top, which results in these two shifts that I do. And hopefully it is not something that I have to think about or do for a very long time. I do this in a constant, continuous manner, and every day or every few days or every week, in not too long time, I are able to realize and make a shift, right? And certain things, as they become deeper, they take a little longer time to transform. But the idea here is to see little changes in a continual fashion and do this stuff. So the unleash and smart tester in you as a summary is about establishing what is the notion of smarts as a key set of key elements, relating it to some of the key activities in the life cycle, connecting it to the outcomes, and then figuring out what was possibly take, which is what I wanted to share with you here. Keep in mind, at the end of the day, when you say smart QA, and you say test, let's say, is really probing. And probing definition is not definitive, meaning you start, you keep on going, and you only stop when time runs out. And what does this mean in the context of the world of machine intelligence today, or Gen AI? It is the same. Probing and prompting are two sides of the same coin, which is what I think was one of the earlier musings that I did maybe a few months ago. And therefore, it's imperative that we exploit machine intelligence along with intelligence of the individual to being the smart tester now. We can't ignore that, nor can we shy away, nor can we be religious about the fact, no, I'm human, I'm more intelligent than machine. We're not arguing about it. We're not fighting it. We are actually, meaningfully coexisting with it. Exploit would be a slightly stronger term. Maybe I would say we're partners, right? And one side is the machines. Advantage, I have an intelligent assistant who works with me, which is the machine, and therefore I am able to flower better. But to be able to do that, I need to be smart, and that's imperative. So one of the things that we are trying to do as we step into our 26th year of Journey Stack, kind of finishes 25 years on the 11th of May, which is like a couple of days from today. So one of the things I've been wanting to do is to kind of evangelize, which I think is what we've been trying to do via some of these musings. But in addition to that, I wanted to kind of look to put together a program, which we call as a Discover Smart QA program, as a 30-day journey, which is no cost. What the idea was and how we are trying to plan to do it as part of the Unleash is look at it as a focused journey of reflection and realization. And how do we want to do this to unleash the smart tester in you? Through a set of daily tasks, which will probably take about 15-20 minutes, which is sent as an email, which is designed around 23 essential smart QA practices. Okay, something like this. Okay, do you know the context? It's more like realization questions. That is a practice which is listed down as certain tasks. So it's not a learning where you learn. It's not some article that you read. It's not a video that you watch. It is something that you do. Maybe it's just a very serious, simple set of reflection. Post as an email, which could probably be less than 50 lines, and send it to you, for example, whoever registers, and along these topics, so to speak, which each of these topics are really practices, smart QA practices aligned along the life cycle of understanding, planning, designing, and so on and so forth, ultimately yielding a shift to mindset and stuff. So 30 days, 23 practices, 9 sharp realizations is what we want to accomplish via a simple email-based approach, much like some of the development folks who do what is called as a code challenge, which are reflective in nature. So it's in some sense a simple, painless way of doing things with intention to discover. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of put this as a simple free program, simply because we are very evangelical about smart QA. And what we think it might be required is maybe less than half an hour, 15 or 20 minutes for you to look at those tasks. And these are not heavyweight tasks. Some of them are reflective, some of them are, look at your defects, look at your test cases. Do you know something? Those kinds of reflective and some bit of minor tasks for about 4 weeks. So if you think somebody in your team, or if you're interested, here is the link, and I can certainly share that with you as an email too. But that's what we're trying to do. And I took the liberty of talking about it because I'm not trying to market it for any commercial intent. I'm very keen to spread the word around, help people discover. And then, of course, there are commercial programs which I'm not marketing, which is more of transformation. Right? And that's what we're trying to do as part of this particular program. So thank you so much for being here.